Stop. Read that again. You think you are alive. You think you are continuous. One single you moving forward through time like a straight line that never breaks. But physics doesn't recognize that version of you. Not even slightly. At the deepest level of reality, there is no fixed self. There is no permanent identity sitting behind your eyes watching the world like a passenger in a vehicle. That idea feels true because your brain builds it moment by moment. But feeling is not proof, and the universe does not run on feelings. You are not a solid thing, you are a process. A constantly updating pattern of energy and matter that only looks stable because the changes are too small for your mind to notice in real time. The atoms in your body are not loyal. They are exchanged constantly. Oxygen comes in, carbon goes out, molecules break and rebuild. Over time, nothing inside you stays exactly the same. Even the structure of your brain is being reshaped by experience, memory, and decay. The you that existed years ago is not physically present anymore. It has been replaced piece by piece, without ceremony, without warning. There is no original version left to return to, and yet your mind insists on continuity. It creates a story, a thread, a narrator that stitches yesterday to today and calls it identity. That narrator feels real, but it is only an interpretation, a survival mechanism, a useful illusion. Here's the first uncomfortable truth. You are not one thing moving through time. You are many versions of a pattern, each slightly different, each replacing the last so smoothly that you never notice the transition. The self you think you are right now is already becoming something else as you read this, and there is no way to stop that. Even memory is not stable proof of identity. Memory is reconstruction, not storage. Every time you remember something, your brain rebuilds it, and in that rebuilding it changes. What you call your past is not a recording. It is a rewritten story told by a present mind trying to make sense of what no longer exists. So where are you in all of this? You are not located in the past. That version is gone. You are not located in the future. That version does not exist yet. You are only in a moving instant that refuses to stay still long enough for you to examine it. And even that instant is not stable. Physics does not contain a rule that says you must remain the same person. It contains rules for particles, energy, probability, and interaction. Identity is something your mind overlays onto that chaos because without it, experience would feel like fragmentation. But underneath that overlay is something far less comforting, a system of atoms obeying laws that do not care who those atoms once belonged to. You call yourself a person. The universe sees a temporary arrangement. You call yourself stable. The universe sees constant replacement. You call yourself continuous. The universe sees interruption after interruption so small you cannot feel them, and this leads to a deeper shock that most people avoid thinking about. If every part of you is constantly being replaced, then what exactly is you? Not your body. It changes, not your thoughts. They fade, not your memories. They rewrite themselves. Not even your personality. It shifts under pressure, experience, and time. So what remains? From a strict physical perspective, nothing permanent remains at all. Only patterns, only transitions, only processes that resemble identity long enough for consciousness to believe in it, and that belief is powerful enough to feel like truth. But it is still belief. The unsettling part is not that you are changing. Everything changes. The unsettling part is that there was never a fixed version of you to begin with. No original self sitting beneath the layers. No permanent observer untouched by time, just a sequence of states pretending to be one continuous being, and the more carefully you look at it, the harder it becomes to find where one you ends and the next begins. There is no clear boundary, only smooth replacement, only motion, only transformation that never stops long enough for you to call it anything solid, and yet you live as if that solid thing exists. That is the illusion, not that you exist, but that you are one thing that remains the same while everything else moves. You don't notice it, but everything about you is in motion. Not just your thoughts, not just your body. Your entire existence is being rewritten in real time, and the universe is not pausing for your awareness of it. There is no stable self inside physics. There are only interactions, fields, particles, probabilities. Every second new configurations form while old ones vanish forever. Nothing holds still long enough to become permanent. You think you are sitting inside your life, observing it like a passenger, but you are not outside the system. You are inside it, fully embedded, fully subject to its rules, and those rules do not include permanence. Here is a harsh realization. The universe does not store versions of you. There is no backup, no saved file, no preserved identity waiting somewhere in time. What exists right now is all that exists, and what existed a moment ago is already gone, not hidden, not stored, gone. This is not philosophy, it is physics. Entropy does not allow perfect preservation. Information spreads, disperses, decays. Even the most precise structures degrade over time. Your body is not exempt, your brain is not exempt, your sense of self is not exempt. Everything is slipping into higher disorder constantly, and yet your mind resists this idea. It builds continuity where none exists. It stitches together moments into a story that feels smooth, because discontinuity would be unbearable to experience directly. That story is what you call your life. But reality does not contain the story, only fragments. Here's another uncomfortable truth. Time does not move you forward. It breaks you down as it moves. You are not traveling through time like an object moving through space. You are being reconstructed moment by moment, and each reconstruction is slightly different from the last. The difference is small enough that you do not notice it. But over long enough periods it becomes irreversible transformation. There is no return path to any previous version of you. Even if you wanted to go back, there is nothing to go back to. Physics does not allow exact repetition of complex states. The system evolves forward, not backward. Every state is unique. Every moment is unrepeatable. That means every version of you is also unrepeatable. You are not revisiting your life, you are passing through it once, and losing each moment as you go. Not aiming for your survival. It is not aiming for your identity. It is not aiming for meaning. It is indifferent. At large scales it follows statistical behavior. At small scales it follows quantum uncertainty. Neither of these contains intention. Neither of these preserves personal continuity. So the feeling that you are being carried through time safely is not supported by anything fundamental. It is a mental construction built on top of chaos. And the more precisely physics describes reality, the less space there is for a permanent self to exist inside it. This leads to a brutal but clarifying insight. What you call stability is just slow change. What you call identity is just repeated pattern recognition. What you call you is just the current snapshot of a system that never stops updating. And because it never stops updating, there is no final version, no completed self, no finished identity waiting to be revealed, only continuous transformation that you experience from the inside as continuity. Even the idea of now is misleading. There is no universal present moment shared across the cosmos. Time is relative. Events are ordered differently depending on motion, gravity, and frame of reference. What feels like a single shared reality is actually a patchwork of overlapping timelines. So your experience of being here now you is not a universal fact. It is a local perspective inside a much larger structure that does not privilege your viewpoint. And that is the core shock. The universe does not center you. It does not track your identity. It does not maintain your continuity. It only evolves states. And you are one of those states, briefly aware of itself before becoming something else. You were taught to think of death as something ahead of you, a line you haven't crossed yet, a final moment waiting somewhere in the future. Physics doesn't draw that line. It doesn't recognize a clean separation between alive and dead in the way your mind does. It only sees processes, increasing entropy, loss of order, breakdown of structure, transformation of states. There is no switch. No instant boundary, no sharp cutoff where something suddenly stops being you. There is only gradual dissolution, and that changes everything about what you think you are. Here is a hard truth most people avoid. Death is not a moment. It is a direction. From the moment any living system exists, it is already moving along that direction. Cells divide with errors, DNA accumulates damage, neural pathways degrade and rewire. Even repair mechanisms introduce imperfections over time. Nothing in biology remains perfectly intact, so if you define death as the loss of functional order that supports consciousness, then parts of that process are already happening continuously inside you. You are not approaching death from a distance. You are inside the same process that eventually leads to it. Just at an earlier stage, this is not poetic exaggeration. It is structural reality. Complex systems do not collapse instantly. They erode, slowly, unevenly, with brief periods of repair that only delay the inevitable trend, and that trend is always toward greater entropy. Here's another uncomfortable realization. The body you think of as you is already partially gone compared to any past version of itself. Cells die and are replaced. Neurons adjust connections. Proteins degrade and reform. The organism persists, but the exact structure does not. So what survives is not the original arrangement. It is a continuously updated approximation. And consciousness is built on top of that instability. That means your sense of being alive is not proof of permanence. It is proof of temporary coherence. Now consider something even more unsettling. If identity depends on continuous biological function, then identity is fragile by definition. Any disruption in that system, injury, disease, time, or simple decay, alters the conditions that produce the experience of you. There is no independent self separate from the system generating it. So when that system begins to fail, what exactly is dying? Not a fixed object, but a pattern losing the ability to sustain itself. And here is the third shock. From a purely physical standpoint, there is no point at which the universe marks you as dead. There is only a transition where complexity decreases beyond the threshold needed to maintain organized behavior. After that, the atoms remain, the energy remains, the matter remains, but the pattern that once produced awareness no longer does. And the universe does not distinguish between meaningful pattern and non-meaningful pattern. That distinction exists only in conscious interpretation. So what you call death is not disappearance from reality, it is the end of a specific organization of matter that once supported a viewpoint. Nothing more, nothing less. Now here is the part that reshapes perspective if you let it. If death is a process already embedded in life, then life itself cannot be separated from it. They are not opposites, they are stages of the same physical evolution. You are not alive now and dead later in a strict binary sense. You are a system temporarily maintaining order inside a universe that trends toward disorder. And that maintenance is constantly failing at microscopic levels while being temporarily compensated for by biological repair. This means every moment of life is also a partial failure of preservation. And yet, from inside the system, it feels continuous. That feeling is the illusion of stability created by processes too fast and too complex to perceive individually. So what you experience as being alive is not separation from death. It is resistance to it, temporary resistance. And that resistance is already weakening, not suddenly at some distant endpoint, but continuously from the beginning, which leads to a final realization. If death is not an event but a process, then the fear of it is often based on imagining a sharp boundary that physics does not support. The universe does not jump from everything to nothing. It transitions through states where organization gradually dissolves until the pattern that once produced awareness no longer holds. But the underlying reality never disappears, only the structure does. And that structure was never permanent to begin with. You believe you are in control, you feel it every day. Choosing, deciding, steering your life forward like a driver behind the wheel. But physics does not describe you that way. It describes you as a system responding to prior conditions, a chain of causes stretching back far beyond your awareness. Every thought you call yours is the endpoint of a long physical process you never authored. Neurons fire before awareness arrives. Chemical gradients shift before intention forms. Emotions arise before language explains them. And only after all of that does the mind create a story that says, I chose this. That story is powerful, it feels absolute, but it is late, always late. It arrives after the event and names it as if it originated it. Here is a disturbing realization. You do not experience decisions being made, you experience decisions already made. The sense of I am choosing is a reconstruction, a narrative overlay placed on top of neural activity that has already determined the outcome. This does not mean you are imaginary. It means your experience of control is not what you think it is. Now go deeper. Every preference you have was shaped by genetics, by environment, by memory, by exposure, by countless interactions that set the boundaries of what your brain can even consider. You did not pick the architecture that produces your thoughts. You are operating inside it, and that architecture is constantly being modified without your permission. Here is another harsh truth. Even your sense of wanting something is not free. It is generated. It emerges from conditions you did not choose: hunger, fear, reward systems, social conditioning, past reinforcement loops. All of it builds the direction of your desires before you ever become aware of them. So what exactly is free will inside this structure? From a strict physical perspective, it is the experience of decision-making occurring inside a system that cannot access the full chain of causes producing that decision. In other words, you feel free because you cannot see what constrains you, not because you are unconstrained. And this gap between reality and perception is where the illusion lives. Now consider something even more unsettling. If every decision is the result of prior states, then the idea of a fully independent self making choices in isolation collapses. There is no central commander, no isolated thinker separate from the machinery of thought. There is only the machinery, and awareness observing its output. This leads to a shift that is difficult but important. You are not the origin of your thoughts, you are the place where thoughts appear. That distinction changes everything, because if you are not the author of your mental content, then judgment of that content becomes more complicated. Regret, pride, guilt, certainty, all of these are built on the assumption that you could have produced a different outcome as the same exact system you were at the time. Physics does not support that assumption. If the state of the system is identical, the output will be identical. There is no hidden override, no separate chooser standing outside the causal chain, and yet life feels like choosing. That is the paradox of consciousness. It experiences outcomes as if they are open, even though they are continuously being determined in real time by factors already set in motion. So where does that leave responsibility, or meaning, or action? It forces a different perspective, not one of absolute control, but one of participation. You are not outside the system steering it. You are the system expressing itself through a localized point of awareness, and that means every action is still real. Every consequence still matters. But not because you are separate from causality, because you are part of it. Here is the deeper shock hidden underneath all of this. If you are not the ultimate source of your thoughts, then you as a separate controlling entity becomes hard to locate anywhere in the physical description of reality. There are processes, there are reactions, there are patterns, but the singular independent driver you feel inside your head is not something physics explicitly requires. It is something your brain constructs to unify experience into a usable model, a model that helps survival, not necessarily truth. And once you see that, something subtle shifts. Life stops being a series of pure choices made by a fixed self, and starts looking like an unfolding system of responses inside a universe that never stops pushing it forward. You are not outside that flow. You are the flow becoming aware of itself. And that awareness feels like control, but it is observation layered over inevitability. If everything is changing, if identity is unstable, if control is an illusion layered over causality, then what is left that actually matters? Not what you think it is, not permanence, not certainty, not a fixed self that survives untouched through time, because none of those exist in the way your mind imagines them. What remains is something quieter, something more immediate, and far more unsettling when you first see it clearly. Only experience, only this moment of awareness inside a system that is constantly rewriting itself. Physics does not give you a stable identity to hold on to. It gives you processes, fields interacting, energy shifting, information evolving, and within that movement, consciousness appears briefly, like a temporary pattern that the universe forms and then dissolves again. There is no guarantee it continues in the way you assume. There is only the fact that it is happening now. Here is a final hard truth. The universe does not need you to be consistent for you to exist. It does not require your identity to remain intact. It does not preserve yourself across time as a single unit. That continuity is something your brain constructs, because discontinuity would be too fragmented to experience directly. But beneath that construction is something raw, a sequence of moments that never actually repeat. Every second is new, not slightly different, fundamentally unrepeatable. Once it passes, it is gone without storage, without replay, without return. And you are inside that flow, not observing it from outside, inside it completely. Now consider this shift in perspective. If nothing about you is fixed, then what you call your life is not a possession. It is not something you have. It is something that is happening. right now, not as a story already written, not as a path already defined, but as a continuous emergence of states unfolding without a final version waiting at the end. There is no completed you ahead of you, only transformation. And the deeper you understand that, the more fragile the idea of waiting becomes, waiting for the right time, waiting to become someone else, waiting for clarity, certainty, permission, stability. From the perspective of physics, nothing is waiting. The system is always already evolving and you are always already inside it. Here is another unsettling realization. If awareness is tied to specific physical conditions, then it is not guaranteed across time. It is not guaranteed across states. It is not guaranteed in the way most people unconsciously assume it is. It appears under certain conditions of complexity and organization, and when those conditions change beyond a threshold, the pattern no longer supports the same experience. The atoms remain, the energy remains, but the structure that produces the feeling of being someone does not. So what you call you is not a permanent entity traveling through time. It is a temporary configuration that allows the universe to experience itself from a localized perspective for a brief interval. And that interval is not infinite. That is the brutal honesty of physics. Now the shift. If you are not permanent, and nothing around you is permanent, then meaning cannot come from permanence. It has to come from presence, from the fact that awareness exists at all inside a universe that does not require it to, from the fact that complexity briefly organizes itself into something that can observe complexity. That is rare, not in a poetic sense. In a physical one, order is not the default state, it is the exception, and consciousness is one of the most fragile expressions of that exception. So the implication is simple, but not easy. You are not here to remain unchanged, you are here as change, and every moment you postpone engagement with your existence as it actually is, you are treating something temporary as if it is guaranteed, but nothing in physics guarantees continuity of the observer, only continuation of processes. So what do you do with that? You stop treating life like it is pre-written. You stop assuming there is a stable, later version of you that will handle everything eventually. You stop outsourcing existence to time because time does not preserve anything for you, it only transforms it. And finally, here is the hardest confrontation. If you strip away permanence, illusion of control, and imagined continuity, what remains is not emptiness, it is immediacy, a single unfolding moment where awareness exists without justification. And that is all you ever actually have access to, not the past, not the future. Only the current configuration of reality briefly aware of itself before it becomes something else. So the call is simple, and there is no softer version of it. Stop living as if you are guaranteed to continue. Stop waiting for a version of you that does not yet exist. Act inside the only certainty physics actually gives you. This moment is happening, and then it is gone.